JDNBA.com. This is John. This report is for the 1st of December, and the Santa rally arrived just in time. We saw that we were poised for a turnaround within the setups. We had dipped below the red line, but the shakeout had remained positive. We had started that new gold run, which I had mentioned the other day, and it was just a matter of waiting for a catalyst, and we got it. Well, we didn't really get anything. All the Fed was saying was that given the weakness that they're starting to see, which they expected to happen, they're going to slow the rate of increases. But they did talk about the normalization of rates, like I was mentioning before. And it's that idea that probably they want to get into that middle 4% range to give them much more room to maneuver and the consequences of inflation that were just part of having to get back to that normalization. And there you have it. But from a market standpoint, they think that that means quantitative easing is going to start again. And until they don't believe it, we'll believe it with them because you always go with what is. From an NQ standpoint, it was a big improvement there with the orange dip below DOC right there, red, and the green spike. You had short-term, mid-term, long-term buyers, everybody flipping. We already had the P2 start there, but that one was a little weak with the orange up, so this one far more significant. And the result is clear. It was a rare day because everything was up. So, while yields went down as TLT goes up, but just fractionally. And that's just because the expectation is that things are going to slow, but that's not necessarily a great thing. And the cost of good replacements is still going to be very high. Oil holding above 80. Again, as there was a massive draw of crude, which means that there's still economic activity. So again, this gets back to my hypothesis where certain areas were going to suffer disproportionately into the broader scale. So it makes it a little more interesting as far as an economic read. Gold also rising on that because, again, there's no signs that they're going to stop inflation at this rate. So the euro is also up because, again, they're not having to spend as much for the gold demand, and with a slower Fed rate, the euro will be able to catch up with their supposed increases, which they say they're going to do. And even Bitcoin was posed to start making a move. I think they started to get to that stage where we were seeing here some early builds with the dips of the orange below. We had a little problem with this one because the steel had moved above 13.5, which is the equivalent of it coming from underneath. Once it dipped back below, that created the new setup, and above 23% was all good. But shakeout's still ugly, so any reversal in magenta like this with the white MBI lead, I think you're going to see a fade back. Um, it's just inevitable. It's the way it works when that happens because you just had too much carnage, and you can see the identical. Now it's possible this can run for a little while, but not so much with the white leading, particularly if the magenta pivots below 25. I think that's the easy marker just to look at. From a 50K standpoint, it's quite nice. We were talking about it in the video where we had these spikes of the white, and it was just a matter of saying, okay, well, as soon as we get our pivot lower, we're going back to the 0%, and we were talking about right, the rise, and sure enough, went right back to the 0%. But at that point, you had magenta rising above, and didn't quite have the dip the first one, but it was certainly a warning to declare once the blue got over the gray right down here. That's usually a key, especially with magenta over. And then it was not necessarily a buy in my view until you get to that 23 because you've got to prove that you can break through there. But once it did, it was all perfect. You had green DOC over cyan, and the shakeout had turned back around and it was off to the races. But as you can see, positive extremes going all the way back to the 39.90 level. So I just marked them there, and we'll have them for later because we will be revisiting them from the Viv 5. I know it's always fun to say that because it's just, well, we just know that that's the way it's going to work. So from a 5K standpoint, early weakness was clear, and plenty of softness within that. You can see it with all those white spikes here, the MBI white, and we went to the zero on each of them, and then started to catch a few runs, still put in some decent sells. That was another good one. Should have marked that one there for everyone. And then the interesting turnaround, because we had the red spike above, which is usually pretty weak, but then magenta popped above it and you're above the 23%. That's fairly positive, particularly when the green came over there. So even if you were reluctant because of the weaker shakeout, it was already in the improvement mode. By the time you got over 38%, it was pretty clear where things were going. Still created some back and forth, but then as the announcement started to go through, we started to get some hype about what was going to be coming, and that started to create the bull run. And a little jagged at first, but then once it took off, it was a done deal. All positive extremes. But then again, we've already had these marked, so no need to change any of them. And that was pretty much it for the rest of the day. It was just some continued pops. And once you know you've got a cycle run like that, you're not looking for a whole lot of these retraces. In fact, what I'm looking for is the opportunity to be able to jump in. And when you have cyan under red, you don't even have to think about it, because it's always a buy. And in fact, that's where it stayed most of the day, following the DOC there, cyan under red, uh, literally almost the entire way. Have we petered out yet? Well, we're starting to get some signs of weakness, but you've got an extremely fast rising Morganacci 0%. So even if you do, it's still going to be relative. You're probably just going to fill in, I would say, probably somewhere down into that mid 4064 at best, uh, unless something changes catalyst wise as far as reason for more selling, because, the holidays always have a Santa rally. We'll keep following it along as we go. As always, though, trade well, and we will talk to you later.